Welcome back to the Shaping Your Success channel. I'm Ali Thompson of Hay Legal. Today I'm in discussion with one of the biggest names in English rugby union, Charlie Hogson, the leading Premiership point scorer of all time. Of relevance to lawyers will be his thoughts on individual and team performance, the importance of common goals, culture and values to a team, how elite sports people deal with setbacks, and why effort is more important than talent. I begin by asking Charlie about the challenges of a career in elite sport coming to an end. We hope you enjoy the discussion.
It was hard. It was really hard, actually. I think because it's not only stopping what you love doing, and that ultimately for me it was a hobby. I was getting paid to do my hobby, which is amazing, and knocking around with my mates every single day, having a laugh. Like it was like I was still at school. But the biggest thing is this change of identity, and not just me personally, but actually a bit of an adjustment for my family as well, actually.
Right.
And they've kind of always known me, not say always known me. I've always played rugby since I was 9 years old. It's been in my blood. So, but even as a professional from 19 years old to 36, that's a big amount of time of my adult life, or it is my adult life to a point. So, for my parents to adjust to that and say, actually, there's something else we need to talk to them about now I've retired, not just rugby. That's taken a big shift as well, and I think it's taken them a bit of getting used to. So yeah, it has definitely been difficult. I wouldn't say it's an easy ride. I don't think anybody who leaves professional sport, whatever that is, I think everybody finds it hard because you're leaving something that you love doing. Now, of course, you have horrible moments, but you're doing something which very few other people in the world get to do. And I was living that every single day and every single week. I was able to go out on the field and do what I love doing. So I count myself very lucky to have experienced that.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are genuinely fascinated by elite sport, and clearly, having to operate at such a high level all of the time, and then having crowds to play in front of, and the buzz of all of that, it must be so difficult to replace that once it actually just quite suddenly stops.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, isn't it? It's that feeling of perhaps being wanted, maybe. And you don't do it for the adulation. You don't do it because you want the attention. I mean, I couldn't be further from like that sort of press attention seeking thing if I tried. But yeah, how do you replace that feeling of achievement, but also loss as well? I think it's knowing that you've all got this common goal, and you've shared a moment with somebody else, whether that's good or whether that's bad, and then you sort of go through that process of enjoyment or go through that process of reflection and learning and taking it into the next week. So the most amazing moments sometimes were not necessarily going out and experiencing the noise of the crowd, which sometimes was unbelievable, particularly when you're playing in France, the deafening noise that you experience. But actually, those moments, those precious moments you get in the change rooms afterwards, when you've been through a really difficult time, but everybody else in the room has also been through a really difficult time, and you've come out the other side, and everybody's feeling good, and everybody's happy, and they're really special things that it is difficult to replace.
In relation to the dynamic between the individual and the team, so you're obviously got your individual performance to be concerned about, and then there's obviously the team, and you need team in a team sport clearly to win.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that out? Because obviously this podcast will be listened to by people in law firms who are got individual performance, but they've also got they're part of a department, part of a team. So just in elite sport, how does that play out for you? The difference between individual and team.
Team comes first. Doesn't matter what it is. You could probably have somebody who isn't the most talented. You might have two individuals, one who isn't the most talented, but if he's got the team at his best interest, more likely he's the one that's going to be picked ahead of him. So, yeah, like you say, you still have that individual element. Everybody's still trying to get better. We're all in that environment because we want to achieve and we want to get better as an individual. But when you're in a team environment, that success only comes because you're relying on other people as well. You can't do it all yourself. So therefore, it takes a huge amount of trust to go through through those moments, I guess, and to create a strong environment. But like I say, it's the team that comes first more than anything else. Before you think about the individual.
And for the best teams that you're involved in, how do they cope with hard times and challenges?
Well, I guess from my experience of being at Saracens in particular, and I know they've obviously had their off-field issues with regard to the salary cap, so don't talk about that. But one of the strengths for me around that environment was it was very much based on values and creating this culture where we were all sort of accountable to the values of the organisation. I know they were plastered everywhere, and honesty certainly was one of them. And we relied heavily on them as a playing group. So whenever we came through hard times, we could always rely on those. We were always bringing ourselves back to those. So if we found ourselves we've had a loss, and I suppose work rate was one of them. So we would always look at work rate and analyse, okay, well, did we outwork the opposition? If that's a core value to us, it might seem very simple, but actually it's quite a nice way of being able to reflect rather than pointing the finger about whether something was good or whether something was bad. It was actually more about reflecting on the values themselves and on effort as opposed to the ability of somebody, which for me was a real shift in with how I analysed games. I'd come from an environment which was very much about win or lose. If you win, you're happy. If you lose, it's the worst thing in the world. But actually, you reflect a little more and look into a little more detail as to, okay, well, we don't have to lose our heads if we've lost a game. That there's going to be reasons why we've lost. Let's look at it a little more pragmatically, and let's not get too emotional about it, and let's start to analyse it a little more and to delve a little deeper into why things happen.
Yeah.
And as I say, without pointing the finger. And I think a lot of that comes down to certainly the values that I talked about, but also, which is intrinsically linked really, is the culture of the organisation. And I mentioned it before around trust. There's a hell of a lot that goes into that process, but you trust each other, you've got a good culture. It means there's no backstabbing. It means if it does get emotional, it's not personal. And I think it's a really strong way of being able to cope with those moments to come out the other side.
Yeah. And so the club has to set that. I think it's teams like perhaps the All Blacks, where there's very strong moral code and ritual and standards, and each player, I think, understand when they get the chance to become an All Black, the whole notion is that the jersey is far bigger than them. They're just a mere custodian of the values of that.
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true. You have it's this feeling of responsibility that it's not yours to keep, but you do everything you can, guided by that moral compass that is set out. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but that's obviously one of the reasons, of course, why they maintain their strength as a team.
And tell me, in terms of whether it's been a coach in a sporting environment or a business leader, how important is the coach to all of this, whether it's setting standards or identifying the ethos of the club?
Of course, they've got to have that ability to make the difficult decisions, but I would definitely say that the tone is set by the leader, by the captain, by a management team. It's their behaviours ultimately set the tone for everybody else, because if they start cutting corners and they start doing things that is noticed by others, then it's quite easy for other people to go, well, do you know what, if they're doing it, I think I can get away with that as well now.
Yeah.
And it starts to drip through the organisation, and it's just the same from a rugby environment, and they would hold us accountable to those behaviours just as much as we would hold the coaches and the captain and the head coach to their behaviour.
Yeah.
And we were more within our right to say something if we didn't feel it was if they were sticking to what we all believed in as a collective.
Yeah.
And so as I guess, as much as we all have a responsibility, don't we? I mean, at the end of the day, if we're part of a team, we've all got that responsibility to act and behave in a certain way. But it's certainly important the person at the top reflects that better than anybody else.
And what about the role of the captain? I mean, I for one, I have to admit, I'm fascinated by the dynamic between, for example, Sir Alex Ferguson and Roy Keane, where you have what seems to be the lieutenant in the dressing room for him, person who polices it all, but then it all turns. What's your experience of being a captain and the role of a captain?
As through my professional career, I was never really captain that often. I suppose I played in a position which was kind of part of the leadership group, as it were. Yeah. But it's a really interesting dynamic because they've got to manage the expectations of the playing group, and of course, the playing group is the one that they are closest to. So they've got the ear of them, but they've got the ear of the head coach and that coaching group, and they've got to be able to manage that relationship as well. So I think it takes a really strong person to be able to manage those relationships between both parties, but also be able to concentrate on their own game as well. It takes, I don't know, you can use the example of, I'm not sure, but for example, somebody in my position as a fly half, for example, like you've already got so much going on. So is it in the best interest of that player to then become captain as well? So you're also managing loads of other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the best captains I've worked with, they were in decision-making positions, but they were able to see the bigger picture all the time.
Mm.
Brad Barrett at Saracens, Steve Borthwick at Saracens, those guys, unbelievably well prepared in what they did. They understood that relationship between the coaches and the players, but also they spoke well to the players and to the group. But actually, it was also their leadership by action, by what they did on the field. So they gained the respect. Of course, you have to have it anyway, from a rugby point of view. But they certainly had the respect of the players because of their playing ability, but also their ability to manage different relationships and difficult conversations with people.
Mm-hmm. So, and a note from your Twitter feed that you've been taking part in Stress Awareness Month, and posting various different images of trying to navigate your way through these times. Obviously, with sport, there's tremendous highs and tremendous lows. So, in order to achieve that, you need to be obviously very well balanced. But what do you think the secret is to repeat individual elite performance?
I guess there's a number of things. I've written a couple of things down here. So the first one is goals. So everybody has to have a goal to achieve something, whether that's 4 years down the line or whether that's in 6 weeks' time. There's something that you've got to go after. Because if you don't have that, then you're kind of looking at it and go, what is the point? But in the same sense, if you're looking at the rugby terms, and you've got 12 teams in the Premiership all trying to win the trophy, everybody's got the same goal. So if that's the same goal, how do you distinguish yourself from everybody else, and how do you maintain that expectation? So the important thing that comes is this thing of enjoying the journey of getting there, and enjoying the small wins that you have along the way. So the goal may be to win the Premiership, to win the trophy at the end of the year. But if you break that down into 40 weeks worth of work, and each week is a project of something, then you can start to think about, well, what are my small goals that I'm aiming towards? And you can start to reward yourself. And if things don't go the way you want, then start to reflect on why. So, and that's where the adaptation comes. So you've got this crazy goal that's miles ahead, but you've also got these little goals that you're going for. And if they don't go well, why don't they go well? And then what do you learn about yourself, even when you win, to be able to adapt to an ever-changing environment that we find ourselves in? From week to week, we're playing different teams, all have different styles. So it's the adaptation to what's going on in that moment. And linked to that heavily is learning. You kind of just spoke about it really, but setting out your goals, understanding that you have to adapt to every situation that you find yourself in, but learning along the way. And the quicker you learn, the better chance you have of being able to apply it in a game at the weekend. And I guess the rest of it purely comes from individual motivation. Some people are more motivated than others. Some people are more ambitious than others. Some people are quite happy at whatever level they're at. But I think certainly in the sporting world, you find that you've got a bunch of people who are, I'm not saying high achievers, but very ambitious, and they want to achieve. So it's always like, well, what next and what next and what next? And they're always onto the coaches to say, how can you help me get better at this? What can I do that's going to help me get better at this? And the players who eventually become world class are those ones who've actually probably stuck at it a bit longer than anybody else. And it's their work ethic that's got them through. I think you're listening on a side point, listen to somebody like Gary Neville speak about his career. He maintains that he was never one of the best players. It was just his attitude and his work ethic that got him to where he was. And he was part of this machine that motored on with Man United. So, and it's that same idea. They've got the same goals, but they kept adapting, they kept learning. And every single year, even though teams are trying to knock them off their perch, they were still learning about themselves.
Yeah, I suppose Neville's actually a perfect example of it, because I think I read recently, it was in Wayne Rooney's article, it's in the Sunday Times, and I actually think he referenced Gary Neville and said he's not a very good footballer, which and you think, Right, hold on a minute. I think he won the league like 9 times.
Yeah, mad, isn't
But
it?
clearly, he's a perfect example. You know, he bought into the club, he bought into its values, he bought into Ferguson's ways of doing things as a leader, and then he worked like obsessively
Yeah,
on his game to make much more out of what he really naturally had.
yeah.
You
But I
know?
think there's also there must be also something in what Alex Ferguson did with the players. Like, I spoke to somebody the other day, and he was talking about everybody in that position has the ability, they have the skill to play. So there's something else that's going to get the best out of them, and that's motivation, that's confidence. So Alex Ferguson must have drilled into them this unbelievable positivity, this unbelievable amount of confidence in them to go, do you know what? You are the best team around. And when everybody comes to Old Trafford, nobody messes with you, and you will win. And it's that mentality that had in them that whole time, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, teams are sometimes beaten before they went to Old Trafford just because it was Ferguson. And actually, even in his last year when they won the league, the team actually, far be it for me to say, but the team actually weren't that good, really. But he just had them believing. And, you know, they were Man United players. They were wearing that jersey. They were meant to win. They would find a way.
Yeah.
I think he basically almost fabricated about the Fergie time thing that we come good in the end and that we get better after January, whereas the stats didn't actually really say that, but he kept repeating it, and they then started to believe it.
Yeah.
And I think the Ferguson's ability also to keep winning, but to recycle teams, so that he built numerous fantastic teams, but never had prolonged periods where it just performance completely dropped off.
Yeah, and quick to understand the players who were coming through, and also the players who were getting to the end.
Yeah.
Thinking, or even the ones who are almost the bad eggs of the group, I guess. Okay, and do you know what? He's been great for what we needed for this short period of time, but I guess it's like managing high egos in an office environment. I think there's only a certain amount of time that's got a bit of a shelf life to being able to say we can look after this girl or guy for a period of time, but then it becomes tiresome. It starts to impact others in a negative way. So, and I think Alex Ferguson had a very good intuition there of thinking, do you know what? He's probably on his way out. He needs to go to keep the balance of the team.
And he always talked about control. I think that was his big word, control, that he couldn't allow anyone to be too off the scale or bigger than the club. You know, they had to make sure that he made tough decisions so that everyone knew the club was bigger. And I always loved the way that he'd have a bad result and he would just move the narrative on. Even in the post-match interview, he would say, it's the nature of this club that we bounce back from challenges. And even with a bad performance, I'm sure the players, they would feel emboldened by that. They would be ready to go again.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's the change of narrative which helps that motivation again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I remember times being at Saracens where we could have lost the game on the Saturday. On the Monday after our meeting and just after lunchtime, we'd walk out there as if we'd just won the game. Like they changed everything, and I was going, hold on a sec, I'm used to getting shouted at and getting a bit of stick for what's just happened, and yet here we are walking out into the training field in the afternoon feeling $1 million because they've somehow pumped us up again to make us feel amazing before we start the week's preparation for the next game. And like you say, just changing that narrative a little bit just changes the psyche as to what's going on in your mind, and it shows, doesn't it, how much it is mental in every aspect that we're talking about, not just on sport.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion and chance to hear from an elite sports person as to the elements of ongoing success. We look forward to releasing more extracts of our discussion with Charlie in the months ahead.